Well, good morning, everyone, from here in London, and we're absolutely delighted to greet two guests dialing in from Nur-Sultan in Kazakhstan. We have with us today Professor Alexander van der Putte, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for the Astana International Financial Centre, and Tolkien Takashova, who's the head of the Research Project Office, also at the AIFC. Now, you'll know me. I'm Michael Mainelli. I'm one of the directors of ZIEN. And it really is a delight to be able to introduce so many of these events for the FS Club and others. And the financial centers of the world is something that we can only present because our sponsors allow us to range widely and freely across subjects to do with technology, economics, and finance. And AIFC, as you can see here, is one of those sponsors, and we very much appreciate the support and tolerance, if I can call it that, of all of our sponsors. Now, today's agenda is fairly straightforward. We're going to be looking very much at All Eyes on Nur-Sultan. This is a report that came out this morning, and if you look in the chat room, you'll see that the report is there, and it's up on our website under reports, and it's also next to the web calling notice that you had as well. So an easy to find report, but probably quickest is just to look in the chat room. Now, my job is to get out of the way so that you can hear from our experts. I'll do that as quickly as possible, but may I raise just three things. The first thing is, yes, the slides are available, as well as the report, which is a short report, 14 pages, but a darn good read, and really summarizes the immense achievements of a center that is astonishingly only 3 years old. Second thing is that the recording will be available in approximately 2 working days. So hopefully we'll be up sometime on Thursday. And finally, we will have enough time here for some questions, answers, or observations. And given the fact that Nur-Sultan is very much at the center of the Belt Road Initiative, amongst other things, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of comments and questions. If you feed them into the chat facility, I will pose them to Alexander and Tolkien during the Q&A. Please don't text me, email me, WhatsApp me, signal me, because I'm here with you, and I'll only get those later. All of those questions and comments will be sent on to Alexander and Tolkien with the email attached. So if you want to get in touch with them directly for some reason, simply type that into the chat room, and we will make sure that that happens. So I think with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to our guests today. And Tolkien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Mainelli. Hello, dear partners, colleagues, and friends, and I'm very glad to welcome you all today in our webinar. Please, next slide. So in the next 25 minutes, we will be focusing on Nur-Sultan, the capital of Kazakhstan. And it actually was recently renamed to Nur-Sultan and previously was known as Astana. And actually, for your reference, Astana means capital from Kazakh language. So we will be talking about Nur-Sultan, the city which is developing and proving itself as a financial center on the global stage. But before moving to the progress of Nur-Sultan and AIFC in particular, I would like to place your attention to Kazakhstan first, the great country with a huge potential. Please, next slide. I'm sure that whenever you hear about Kazakhstan, it is definitely about the fact that it is a commodity-rich country with immense stock of natural resources. However, Kazakhstan's offering lies far beyond its natural resources. First of all, it's the geographic location of the country. It is strategically placed between China and Europe, and it also borders with Russia. So, these facts allows Kazakhstan to serve as a gateway and open up the access to around 600 million consumer market. And also, the country is strongly committed towards trade liberalization. It is a member of WTO since 2015. It is a founding member of Eurasian Economic Union as well, which allows a free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor between its member states. So, Via Kazakhstan, there is a unique access to relatively untapped market of Eurasian Economic Union. The market, which has a huge land area, combined GDP of nearly $2 trillion and total trade turnover with third countries of around $750 billion. Please, next slide. The country is also strongly committed towards developing a favorable investment climate. As you can see, Kazakhstan is the leader in the region for the Ease of Doing Business Index, ahead of not only Central Asian countries, but also Russia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Belarus, and Ukraine. And also, if we consider the development of Kazakhstan from the perspective of its people and the key dimension of human development, UNDP also places Kazakhstan on top compared to other countries in the region. In simple words, what all these rankings mean to you as a potential investor or entrepreneur is that doing business in Kazakhstan is easy and cost-effective because highly skilled labor can be hired relatively cheap. And also on the bottom of this slide, we have placed listed priority sectors for investment, where our country offers additional financial and non-financial incentives and support for anyone willing to make a business in the country and in those particular sectors. Please, next slide. Earlier, I have already mentioned that Kazakhstan is strategically located between giant markets of China and Europe. This fact makes Kazakhstan land an attractive road for transporting goods. And indeed, Kazakhstan is one of the major countries along the New Silk Road. And therefore, I would like to pause here and ask a question to you by launching this poll. So, please answer, in your opinion, what types of goods are shipped along the overland Silk Road from China to Europe, and please select one option.
That's great, Tolkien, and the audience is voting now. Just under half of them have voted, and now we're over the halfway mark. We'll leave this open for just a few more seconds there, on up into 75%. That's great. And now ready to display the results, with well over 80% having voted. And what we see here is very much that 50% of the audience believe it's products with medium to high value. There we go, sorry. Products with medium to high value density, and the audience is split on time sensitive products and limited volumes. And that's great. And are you able to put them out of their misery, Tolkien? What's the right answer?
Interesting results. And before telling the right or wrong answer, I would like to first have a little bit discussion and the background on this matter. Yeah, so let's think together, right? So historically, maritime roads were a preferred way for transporting, largely due to their cost competitiveness. However, the share of rail freight is rapidly increasing. So let's think, why do we see these changes? First, because it saves time. Current rail freight imports from China to Europe is 4 times faster than sea freight. Actually, the train, which was sent from the Chinese city Yushu to London, the transportation time was only 18 days. And it crossed 7 countries. So it saves time 4 times. You should remember this. And also, of course, because rail transportation is more cost efficient compared to air transportation. So for medium to high value density products, it is another preferred way to transport goods than to choose air transportation. So you should remember this. However, developing alternative routes, such as railroads, has become increasingly important, and not only because of cost and time factors, but also because it brings the resilience. And resilience infrastructure is important more than ever today. Why? Just remember about supply chain crash when supermarket shelves became empty in the early pandemic days. Or think about recent blockage in Suez Canal when the stranded ship was holding up to $10 billion of trade along the waterway each day. This is huge, huge numbers. And Kazakhstan understands the importance of infrastructure and develops it heavily. On the map, you can see the shaded lines, which shows transport routes connecting Kazakhstan with different parts of the world. Kazakhstan has a huge internet penetration rate as well. Today, 85% of the country's land is covered by 4G network, and next year we're expecting to launch 5G as well. All these factors are showing that Kazakhstan has the most advanced infrastructure in the Central Asian region. We're very proud of that. There is much more to talk about our country and its advantages, but due to time limits, I will stop here and turn to my colleague, Professor Alexander van de Voet, to talk about Aifc. Please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the kind of introduction. And thank you, Tolkien. It's going to be very difficult to present at the same level of quality as Tolkien did, but I will try to do my best. So, as Tolkien mentioned, I will primarily talk about the AIFC, but also what our vision and mission is, and a couple of case studies, and what we have achieved so far. So on this slide, we have the Aifc ecosystem, and at the center of it, we have the Aifc authority. The Aifc authority is the majority shareholder and sometimes even the sole shareholder in any of the bodies, organizations, and subsidiaries that you see on this slide. Let me highlight a few that are very important for especially international investors. First of all is the Astana Financial Services Authority. That's our regulator. And with our regulator, we want to leverage international standards similar to Dubai, Singapore, or even London. Then at the middle also, we have the Court and International Arbitration Center. And also these are very important because they're based on English common law, first of all, the most used legal system in the world, especially around foreign direct investment and trade. And what is also important is that the court is staffed by only British judges and is chaired by the Chief Justice, which is actually Lord Nance. The International Arbitration Center is chaired by Barbara Doman, QC, and combined, actually, they bring actually trust to to international investors, and a little bit more on that later on. We also have an international exchange, and that international exchange we didn't implement alone. First of all, it's done in partnership with the Nasdaq, and we're also using the Nasdaq technology platform, probably one of the best platforms, trading platforms that is around in the world right now. But also we have other equity investors, including Shanghai Stock Exchange, the Silk Road Fund, but also a small equity investor, which is Goldman Sachs, and everybody, of course, knows Goldman Sachs. Then there are a number of subsidiaries. The Green Finance Center, and I will tell you a little bit more about the Green Finance Center towards the end of our presentation. Also about fintech, and there we're going to have a couple of case studies. But I briefly wanted to highlight also the BCPD, because the BCPD, the Bureau for Continued Professional Development, is there in order to develop the financial, but also the tech professional that is going to be needed in order to implement our vision and reach our mission. The Expat Center is important because we want to make it seamless and transparent for foreign companies to operate in Kazakhstan, and including their own employees that may come from abroad. I'm an expat as well, and I have been extremely beneficial based on our Expat Center in order to get visas and work permits arranged. And it can be done actually very quickly. Lastly, but not least important, is actually Business Connect. And Business Connect is in essence the window on the world. Why do I say that? Because they're primarily responsible for business development. And business development that's aligned with our vision. On the next slide, please. A little bit about our vision and mission and how we de-risk, and then also I want to link it back to some of the comments that actually Tolkien has made. We are indeed called the Astana International Financial Centre, as Tolkien has mentioned. Our name has not changed. However, the name of the capital has changed. So if you think Nur-Sultan, also please think AIFC, and if you think AIFC, also think Nur-Sultan. In terms of vision, we want to become the leading international financial center in the region. That's, of course, a longer-term target, and I think we're well on track in order to achieve that. Number two is our mission, or our purpose, the reason why we exist. And this is about contributing, the AIFC is about contributing to the sustainable economic development of the region by fostering innovative financial products and services. Historically, as Tolkien mentioned, we attracted foreign direct investment in especially the extraction industries. Going forward, it's very likely that it will be in other sectors of the economy. We want to make One Belt, One Road a success. We also are focusing on a renewable energy internet. And in both cases, actually, the AIFC is instrumental of realizing that. And we could actually argue that given its geographic location and its large endowment, that Kazakhstan could be both the buckle of the One Belt, One Road, but also the buckle of the renewable energy internet. Now, when companies want to do business abroad, this is very often a daunting task. And therefore, we want to help de-risk basically projects to make them more interesting and appealing to investors. So consider, for example, an investment, an infrastructure investment. Let's also say it's a sustainable infrastructure investment. What we could do, first of all, we can structure it as an SPV through our regulator. And therefore, although it's not a financial institution, we can actually register that project with the AIFC, and then you get all the benefits of it. We can also, automatically they would get access to our English common law system, and therefore that provides asset protection. There's also zero taxation, and in addition, there is 100% repatriation of profits. Now, finally, what we can also do for eligible projects, we can issue a bond, a green bond or an Islamic bond with the AIX, and therefore reducing the cost of capital and making it more interesting for investors. And that's how we want to help de-risk projects through the AIFC, but then directly linked to the Kazakh economy. Next slide, please. Now, how do we position and market ourselves? Well, this is, in essence, a model that is based on co-opetition. So co-opetition is, on the one hand, we collaborate, on the other hand, we compete. So how do we do that? Let's first talk about the collaboration, which is on the left-hand side, which is the airport model. With the airport model, it's all about connectivity. We're a financial center in the region, but there are other centers in the region and even outside of the region. And we collaborate with other financial centers in order to increase liquidity, reduce the cost of capital, ease of doing business. A good example here is something I will talk about later on, which is CASPI. It's a listing that is done jointly at the AIX. That means in Nur-Sultan at the Astana International Exchange and with the London Stock Exchange. That actually shows the collaboration model. On the other hand, there's also the shopping center model. And basically one-stop shop for all the services that an investor may actually need. And interestingly, there's something that was initially on hold because of the pandemic, but we were starting it, which is called Multipass. And what we're doing with Multipass is basically through our Expat Center, investors can apply for a visa that would give them access not just to Kazakhstan, but to the entire region. So they can come to us, they would get access to travel to Kazakhstan, but also the entire region, visa free. And it's called Multipass. It will take some time to implement because, of course, it involves other jurisdictions in the region. But this is how we want to implement our model based on collaboration and competition, and therefore enhancing the size of the pie, but also making sure that different parties get a fair slice of the pie. Next slide, please. So a quick overview about the AIFC in numbers. Michael mentioned that we exist for 3 years. So that's not a long period of time. And I'm actually very pleased to present this particular slide because it is a good slide to present. I'm not going to highlight everything here. You will get the presentation and also the recording, as Michael has mentioned. But let me just highlight a few. First of all, I mentioned, and also Tolkien mentioned, that we're an international financial center. Well, that means that we need to have participants from various countries. Well, in our case, 51. 51 different countries are represented among the 750 registered companies with the AIFC. But there's more to it. There's, of course, aspects around money. That means foreign direct investment, but there's also aspects about liquidity. So if you look at foreign direct investment, to date, we have reached $2.6 billion. And if you look at market capitalization on the AIX, we're talking about in excess of $31 billion, which makes us increasingly a contender to become a medium-sized financial center, not anymore a small or incubator financial center. Also want to highlight the importance of having access to local talent. We have developed a reserve pool of in excess right now of 12,000 people in various areas, including in areas like programming and coding. That's going to be important for things that I will talk about later on, including fintech. I mentioned about the legal system. Currently, we have almost 250 lawyers registered with the AIFC court, and we have licensed and recognized financial institutions in the AIFC, and they're currently to the amount of 56. But we're also to stimulate entrepreneurship. And currently, we have more than 120 startups that have incubated through the AIFC. So it's not just about attracting foreign direct investment, it's also about stimulating entrepreneurship and evolution of the economic sector. Next slide, please. I mentioned that I was going to do a couple of deep dives. So the first deep dive is actually about fintech. And here in particular, it's about blockchain or distributed ledger technologies. And just a few statistics. We currently, the country that is, Kazakhstan, we rank fourth by distribution of Bitcoin mining hash rate. Fourth in the world, that is. If you look at the share of global Bitcoin mining traffic, we have 1/50, so or 6.17% of the global Bitcoin mining traffic in the country. That's based on 13 mining farms, and the planned investment in mining and data centers over the next 5 years is in excess of $1.2 billion. Of course, you need data centers, and ideally they're also sustainable. That means they're powered by renewable energy sources. On the next slide, I wanted to talk about the success story, and not a success story not only for Kazakhstan, I would say also for the United Kingdom, and in particular the London Stock Exchange. And this very much has to do with the airport model that I previously explained. When Kaspi was listed last year, it actually did its IPO, so it was an initial public offering. The market capitalization was $6.5 billion. So that's about 8 months ago. And it was a joint listing on the London Stock Exchange and on our own Astana International Exchange, AIX. Currently, the market cap is close to $16 trillion. So from 6.5 to almost $16 trillion. To put it in perspective, Halyk Bank or Halyk Securities, which is also listed on the London Stock Exchange and the AIX, which is a more traditional bank, its market cap is way lower than Kaspi, which is based on fintech technology. And it also shows that they have been able to scale their business dramatically. So just look at a couple of numbers. Market share of consumer loans in Kazakhstan, 32%. So that's a third of the entire consumer loans by a single bank that is actually young. 46% of e-commerce gross merchandise value share in Kazakhstan. So that's almost half. And if we look at share of total payment network transactions in Kazakhstan, these are micropayments. I have a Kaspi Gold card myself, and it's also on my mobile phone. That's actually 2/3 of total payment transactions. It is convenient, it's cost effective, and actually it allows people that were previously unbanked to actually have access to banking services. So this is, I would say, a quite remarkable story, not just for Kazakhstan, but actually one that we've only seen previously, like, for example, M-Pesa in East Africa. But it's a similar model, actually, that they have been using and very successfully. And I'm sure that we will hear from them more in the future. On the next slide, please. I wanted to talk about some smaller ones, but equally important success stories. Remember, we want to stimulate entrepreneurship. So a couple of examples here. Let me start with Verigram, which is about identity verification and customer onboarding platform based on machine learning. And so far, they have confirmed in excess of 1 million transactions. Sagi, which is also based on machine learning, has a mobile app for digital gifts and digital certificates, and it's currently the largest in Kazakhstan. And it has a share capital of $1.3 million. iCapitalist, is an investment and crowdfunding platform. If there's one thing where there is a need to further development, then it's definitely access to financing for startups. So, and it's still small, but it's growing very fast. And currently, it has funded through crowdfunding $2.3 million US dollars in Kazakhstan and the region. And then we have two others, QC, also based on machine learning. And that's actually a machine learning stock trading platform. And currently, in terms of entrusted assets, we account 120 million US dollars. And finally, Tabis. Tabis is an investment app for retail investors, and it has 50,000 users to date. On the next slide. And this is actually my last slide, or our last slide. Green finance. Green finance is obviously something that is directly linked to our mission. Remember, our mission is to contribute to the sustainable economic development of Kazakhstan and the region. And the Aifc Green Finance Center, one of the subsidiaries of the Aifc Authority, supported the issuance on the AIX, Astana International Exchange, of our first green bond. As you know, a green bond has particular requirements, and the AIX has a particular taxonomy about the criteria that are needed in order to issue a green bond. But the great message is actually the last message, and that is that recently, only a couple of days ago, Nur-Sultan, has entered the Global Green Finance Index and ranked 57 in the world. We currently rank the first in Eastern Europe and Central Asian region. We obviously want to maintain that position in the region, and we see that as an important way forward in order to drive sustainable investment in Kazakhstan linked to infrastructure. And as Tolkien mentioned, it's both about physical and digital infrastructure. That concludes our presentation. Back to you, Michael. Thank you.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Tolkien and Alexander. I just had a couple of comment slides, really from our perspective here in London, and I've got quite a few questions here as well. So, folks, please do put the questions in the chat room, and we'll get to them. The first is the remarkable performance, and in fact, I think you sort of undersell it in a way. The global center of GDP is darn close to Kazakhstan, as we've seen that moving eastwards. And you came in 25th in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, but the country just above you is Ireland. So you're doing extremely well in both of those categories. So again, performing well, and Alexander, as you said, in the GGFI. My next slide looks at connectivity. And I think this is another interesting bit for many of us, particularly those of us raised during the Cold War. We always sort of feel that Central Asia was behind a wall of some form. Well, that's certainly not the case any longer. This slide examines people who are looking at Nur-Sultan from other centers. And you can see here these extremely good connections to New York and London, very strong links into the Middle East with Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and also well connected with China, but also with Singapore and Hong Kong. So a fascinating position, a fascinating performance, and extremely rapid development in such a short period of time. Anyway, I'd like to turn, we've got quite a few questions here, so we'll try and get them going quickly. I think this is one for you, Tolkien. It's from Bob McDowell. How seamless is rail transport across your borders? How easy is rail transport? Are things stopped, or can they flow through directly?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much for the question. This is interesting question, and it actually refers to one of my earlier slides where I was showing the map, if you can remember, and actually remember you saw the shaded lines which represent the roads, the land roads, so basically from China, the rail freight can be transported to China via two dry ports, which we have on the eastern part of our country. So we have two dry ports, So from there, it can be either transported through the north to European countries, to the northern part, and actually UK as well. And also it can go from the southern east part. It is called Khargos dry port, which is actually we are very proud of. It is one of the biggest dry ports in the world and it connects the transportation again from the China through our country, and it can be easily transported to the southern part of Europe and also to the southern countries, actually like Iran and the via Caspian Sea. We also have ports there as well with the modern infrastructure built recently. We have a lot of investment in both of those ports. And if you remember, if we talk like how easily it can be done, it is actually evidenced by the numbers. So actually, from the city in the eastern part of China, the train which started from there and went all the way crossed all these continents and countries and was sent to London, to the eastern part of London. It took only 18 days. It is remarkable because if you send it through the maritime roads, it can be like 4 times slower. So I guess that explains how easy it can be done, right?
Well, I can personally vouch, believe it or not. I 3 years ago, I had to make a shipment across the Belt Road and on the train, and it went really quite well. So I agree. We've got a question here from Thomas Crothers, who knows a thing or two about exchanges. He says it's interesting to learn a little about Tabis with 50,000 retail investors. And I think this is for you, Alexander. Is the AIFC focused on attracting and engaging and building a domestic retail investor base to assist the market's development?
The answer is yes. We want to develop a domestic retail investor base. Of course, that will take time, but that's definitely something which is part of our ambitions as well. There's actually a lot of capital available in Kazakhstan. Very often, that capital is invested abroad. And as you know, there's no shortage of capital in the world. There's currently about $200 trillion of capital that is looking for bankable projects. We believe that by combining bankable projects through the AIFC, we can actually channel that domestic investor base into bankable projects from where basically all the countries of One Belt and Road can actually benefit from. But it will unlikely be a single investor that's ever going to be involved in a single project. Yeah. So it would be a combination of domestic and actually foreign. But the answer is yes to the question. We want to develop our own investor base.
And just pushing down that road a little further, Ian Harris says, I am especially interested in the ideas about providing finance to the previously unbanked. Could Professor van de Putte explain a bit more about how machine learning is being used to help with this process?
Well, I don't know exactly what the algorithm is behind what Kaspi is using. But as a consumer, and of course I was previously banked, but I was willing to switch to Kaspi because of its significant convenience. First of all, that's the first thing. So they seem to understand my buying behavior quite well. And I guess that must be based on machine learning. Number two is that the transaction costs are virtually nil. It's very, very small. And of course, for people that are unbanked, And by the way, the mobile phone penetration in Kazakhstan and smartphone penetration in Kazakhstan is among the highest in the world. So people do have a device, but they didn't have access to banking services. In part because only about 50% of the people actually live in cities right now. Migration is happening quite quickly to urban areas, and therefore they will need access to finance and being banked. But it's more than just making transactions. It's also about areas of microcredit. It's also about investing in the future of your own children, education, and so on. So that platform is not just there in order to buy, let's say, bananas or potatoes or anything else, or in a restaurant, but basically for microcredit, but also in order to invest in the future of the next generation. Thank you.
Bob McDowell again, talking, I think this one is for you. He's interested in what major trade agreements does the country have and what future trade agreements are envisaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I believe it is a very wide question to be answered. We can get back, because we should cover, all previous trade agreements and the future prospective agreements to be signed between Kazakhstan and the rest of the world. But one thing to note, and I already mentioned that, is that Kazakhstan, the government of Kazakhstan, is very committed to our trade liberalization, and it is actively pursuing that strategy, and it is evident from the agreement with the rest of the world. One of such great examples that I also showed in my presentation is its membership in the Eurasian Economic Union, which is also kind of like a very broader agreement between 5 member states, which allows the countries which within this union to trade freely without any barriers. And not only those it is for the trade, but also for the movement of capital, labor as well. But yeah, if you're interested, yeah, Professor Alexander, please continue, and we can also direct our the audience if he's interested in more details.
Understood. And Alexander, you want to say something?
Thank you, Michael. And indeed, Tolkien, we can reply by email as well. But if you look at historically, one thing that El-Bassi, our first president, did very well. He was very careful about making sure that no country would have a dominant position in Kazakhstan. After all, Kazakhstan is landlocked. And if you look currently at our 5 foremost foreign investors, not in the order, in the order, it's probably the Netherlands first, and that's because of Royal Dutch Shell. Followed, I think, by the United Kingdom. We have Russia, China, and the 5th one is the United States. So those 5 are actually, and if you look at it geographically, it's actually very well balanced. We want to have closer trade ties with the Middle East, of course, within the region, as Tolkien mentioned, within the Eurasian Economic Union, but also potentially with Africa. And there are enormous links to be explored as well. But we would be happy to reply to this particular question by email. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 quick questions in the time available. So if you don't mind being a bit brief. Gareth Ling, and I think this is probably to you, Alexander. How does the AIFC aim to integrate itself into the Kazakhstan economy?
Well, in essence, we are integrated in the Kazakhstan economy. because remember what our mission is. We want to contribute to the sustainable economic development of Kazakhstan and the region. And it's not just about attracting foreign direct investment in big projects, but it's also about stimulating entrepreneurship. So if we look at OECD countries, they have in the area of 60 to 65% are SMEs. In Kazakhstan, it's less than 30%. This is something that through the AIFC we want to stimulate. And this is the reason why I presented, for example, the crowdsourcing fintech company, because there's a strong need for access to financing, not just crowdsourcing, but also venture capital. And Business Connect is actually focusing on that. I cannot yet fully disclose it, the name of the company, but it's a company that has been in Kazakhstan for a long period of time, and they are creating a $250 million investment fund as a minority investor, and entirely focused on the Kazakh economy and through the AIFC. And again, to stimulate entrepreneurship, small and medium-sized enterprises, and navigate the country towards sustainable development.
And I guess a final question, and I'll direct this to Tolkien. You've laid out a fascinating set of developments in a fascinating area, in a fascinating region, in a fascinating country. You've achieved a lot in a short space of time. Chris Martin's son Valerie is curious. What do you see as the main threats or barriers to success from here?
Well, if we talk about risks and threats to our country, I think it's not only relevant to Kazakhstan, but the same threats and risks that are relevant to the whole world, because we live in a very globalized world. And one of such threats was how to handle post-COVID impact that we had on our economy. Of course, Kazakhstan wasn't an exception from the COVID, and it was hit hard by that. So the economy is now one of the risks that our country has, is how to successfully manage and navigate and find the way forward, how to handle that. Another one, Kazakhstan is oil-rich country, right? So it's a commodity-rich dependent country. And as you all know, there is a big fluctuation in the oil price. So that's another factor that might be a threat to a country, and it was actually for a long time. But country is, and the government policymakers are implementing the policies which are aimed to diversify the economy and to find the ways how to find a resilient way to develop the economy and not be only heavily dependent on the oil price and on that area of economy. But of course, these two are the major risks or threats, and how we'll be doing and how we'll be handling, we'll see, and the time will show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm getting a lot of thanks coming in, which means I've probably run over time a little bit, but it has been fascinating. And this tension really between an oil-rich economy and your green ambitions, it has been addressed before. In fact, we had a nice webinar with you last year. But anyway, I have three quick rounds of thanks, if I may. Firstly, to our sponsors, including AIFC. And I hope everybody here has gone away with remembering at least one word from Kazakh, which is Astana, meaning capital. So I think that's been superb. I'd like to thank the audience, if I may. And as ever, we have a variety of events coming up this week. But as ever, just go to the website and have a good look for those that interest you. But certainly there's another one on tomorrow morning on how capitalism could save the planet, which I will address also many of these green issues. But finally, it remains for me to thank our two guests for dialing in today from Nur-Sultan and for presenting not only a great presentation, but really good and open answers. And please do remember that there's a publication up there with a lot more detail. Unfortunately, these days, I've gone to the far end of the Belt Road and I've pulled out my Korean karmic clapper, which is my little applausometer. And I would like to say thank you on behalf of the audience. And we hope to have you back and learn about all the progress that you're making there in Kazakhstan. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael, and also Tolkien. It was a pleasure. And I see that you have kept your sense of humor, Michael. Always good.
Good to see you.